If you have an efficient system and you're using the technologies that are available, there's some really fantastic technologies, what Sina is doing at Zentist and some others that really allow you to have your AR balance over 90 at or near zero.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amol Nirkotkar, and I'm here with my co-host, AJ Peak. Welcome to Healthcare 100, where we're discussing the ultimate playbook for scaling healthcare. Each week, we sit down with operators, investors, and innovators behind the fastest growing DSOs, MSOs, and health tech platforms to really unpack strategies, systems, capital structure that are driving growth. And plus, one of our guests gets to share at least $100,000 EBITDA idea that can use right away. So with that in mind, welcome guys to the show. AJ, why don't you kick this off?
Today, we're talking about zero leaks, capturing every dollar earned, faster, better, RCM mastery. And we really have RCM masters on this panel today. And maybe just start us off, Rob, just to give us a little background on yourself.
Thanks, AJ. Thanks, Amal, for including us. This is going to be a super cool broadcast today. Rob Linder here. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at eAssist. Before that, I started Aspire Dental with some friends. And before that, I was at ClearChoice, but then in the DSO space for about 20 years now.
And Mike?
Yes, I'm Mike Yates. I've been in the DSO space for about 5 years now. Before that in oncology and hospitals, but excited to be here.
Sina?
So I'm Sina Amiri, VP of Revenue and Zentist, and I've been with the company for approximately 4 years. Spent the last 19 years in healthcare, starting with medical and then transitioning in 2012 to the dental industry. And prior to Zentist, I had the privilege of helping build a DSO that was acquiring practices from the ground up and raised private equity capital along the way. And so some of the things that we'll be discussing today is sort of being in the trenches of trying to collect as much as that dollar as possible from both payers as well as plans.
And maybe kind of starting in the same order, ask each of you, kind of what's the current pain in your organization, your client's organization, as it pertains to managing the RCM functions today?
Great question. The current pain for the customers. We right now, eAssist, we serve around 14,000 different practices and DSOs, and we keep getting phone calls about accounts receivable balances and just that aging, getting too old. And we're finding concurrently there's a shortage in skilled RCM resources. And if you add those together, our customers are saying they're able to keep up. We like to joke around, they can make the donuts, but they don't have the extra resources to go back and get everything prepared to make them in the back. And so we've got a lot of customers that are very stressed about those balances and aging as it continues to grow.
Mike, I know the CFO, Peak Dental Services, a pretty large DSO. Kind of, what's the current pain you're seeing now with the RCM function?
Yeah, I think that the biggest pain we're seeing is really on the patient side. I feel like with the technology we have, with the team we have, with the diligence we have on the front end, we do an exceptional job on the insurance side. I know we'll talk a little bit more about it, but I think the big issue we have is on the patient side. And some of it is just that human interaction of a lot of people in the office are not comfortable asking the person standing in front of them for money. It may be somebody they're going to see outside of the office, and they're just not comfortable saying, hey, we've billed your insurance, but you still owe us $500. And so instead of having that difficult conversation, they go ahead and send the patient back. The work is done. They don't collect on the back end of the treatment. And then it goes back to what Rob said, then you're chasing at that point. The work is done. It's not something you can repossess, and it's up to the office and the RCM team to try to make up for lost ground.
Sina?
So for us, we have the benefit of working with more than 100 different DSOs, and I sort of break down the problem into the different stages in the revenue cycle. And one area that I think a lot of practices and DSOs struggle, because it's super manual today, is the reconciliation of remittance information, including EOBs, against bank deposits and clearing that for payment posting into the practice management software. And according to the CAQH index, the average practice ends up spending about 3 minutes to obtain that remittance advice and about 1 minute to get the claim payment information. So you can save 4 minutes, right, per basically claim. And if you multiply that across, if you have 1,000 patients, there's significant, I think, opportunity there to automate. And this is an area that a lot of practices, I feel like they're spending too much time going through the motion where technology can.
So, Sina, let me start with you on this automation AI front, because, we dabbled that in a little bit. There is a lot of inefficiencies in this whole process, right? As we already know that. Zentist has done a an incredible job at figuring out where to use automation, where to use artificial intelligence to solve some of this stuff. So talk to us about the evolution of where technology stands today as it relates to automation, maybe use of some large language models if they are used in anything to, we have had RPA for a long time, but where is automation being served right now, and what comes some of the biggest problems it's solving without need for human intervention?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think what you're seeing right now in the industry is greater use of AI in things like insurance eligibility and verification. And I think part of the reason for that is there's just a lot of vendors that offer AI-assisted insurance verification. And when you look at the improvements that we've made in large language models and generative AI, what you're also seeing is this wave of applications that allow you to basically utilize robotic process automation, but the voice version of that to do things like, for example, automatically call a payer. When we look at the use cases for AI, we really start with where does the data reside? So does it reside on a payer portal somewhere, right? Or is it non-existent right now electronically? If it's not existent electronically, you're sort of out of luck in terms of applying AI. And so we think that the use case around payment posting is a great use case for AI because the data is residing in your payer portals in terms of EOBs. It's residing in your practice management system as far as understanding, what sort of patient visits have happened. And then in addition to that, if you're getting paid from the payer, are you getting a check versus EFT payment? If it's an EFT payment, then AI can go in and scan the bank account and match those deposits. So prior to deploying any AI technology, we like to get an assessment of what is the current sort of digitization rate of the revenue cycle function, both on the provider side as well as the payer side. So when we get the list of payers, we're looking at, are these Cigna, Delta, are these national payers? There is a long tail of smaller payers, right, that may not even have a payer portal. And so becomes really important to sort of do an assessment of the current state of the data and where it resides. And then having good, clean data is really important when it comes to AI. And I think sometimes we forget about that. We've all seen instances where we've deployed AI on top of, say, a practice management system. But if the data within the practice management system is not accurate, it's not cleansed, then the output of that is not going to look great.
Mike, you've been on quite a journey at Peak Dental Services since you joined. Maybe if you could tell the audience what the collection rate is today and what are the kind of big three technology to kind of get the organizations there, I think would be interesting because you said, insurance isn't the pain, it's now on the patients, but I don't know if that was always the case. And maybe helping the audience know what were the big three things, changes you've helped the organization make.
Yeah. So our collection rate on insurance, and I know there will be some head scratching. Our collection rate on insurance is just over about 102%. And obviously there's some of that historical that we're able to pull in. So that number, can only stay that high for so long. But I think AJ's right. I think one of the things that we've done is we have changed our front end process through a lot of the automation of benefit verification, garbage in, garbage out, and I think if we're able to put in the right fee schedule on the front end, the right policy limitations, any exclusions that may, if we're capturing all that on the front end, it removes all the noise on the back end. The other thing that I think we've done pretty well is we've triggered electronic posting. And so again, it's the same process we were doing, but we're getting to that aha faster. If we post a batch, we're immediately getting the reports kicked out to say, hey, we need to take some extra action on this. So we're able to act more timely. We're able to get the doctor, perhaps for additional documentation, whatever, more timely when everything's fresher. And then I do think the other thing is just the diligence around monitoring and consistent reporting. One of the things that we've really focused on is building out a bevy of Power BI dashboards that anybody with the need can get in at any point in time to see agings, adjustment codes, start to figure out the patterns of which offices are making adjustments they shouldn't be, those kinds of things. So it's just the visibility that we have allows us to take action so much quicker than we used to be able to.
And how many automations, less people, if you had to guess, give the organization a sense, in the last 2 years went from X to Y, that, if we did it the old way, how many more people would we need today? I'm just curious what your estimate would be?
Yeah, I think we would probably need at least a half dozen more people. And I think just, benefit verification and posting alone would probably eat up at least that many people. It's just such a manual process as we continue to grow. Every day we're pushing for more patients, more visits. So on the back end, that means more posting and more activity. And I think maybe that's the other piece to the question. We have a scalability we've never had. As we try to do mergers and acquisitions, we will be able to bring on some of these practices without having to immediately go out and increase our staff 10%.
Rob, research suggests that every practice on average has between like a $50,000 and $100,000 leakage annually. And I'm just curious, with your clients, what's the biggest hidden revenue drain when they call you up and you're working with the clients?
A great question on the leakage and what we see. First, let me just start with some of the benchmarks that we'd like to see in the industry. And this benchmark will be one that is kind of a pre-AI benchmark, and that is the AR balance. So as a former accountant, AR balances should be no greater than 1 month's net production. And so if you think about it, if you look at your total AR balance in a year, it should be 112 or 8.3%. And so anytime you come across an AR balance in one of your locations that is greater than that, there's something going on. It's not an efficient process. And then, so that captures your volume. You also want to look at your collection ratios. And so what Mike's done at Peak is really powerful. And I know that you helped him do that. Collection ratios really should be sitting around 98%. When we look at, there's a vendor we work with where we pull large data sets, and we've been currently looking at around a sample set of 20,000 practices throughout the US. And you kind of hit this terminal collection rate of around 98%, where 2% is uncollectible for lots of various reasons that are more systemic and system related as opposed to the collectability of the money. I think those two benchmarks are powerful. And then also your over 90 balance. If you have an efficient system and you're using the technologies that are available, there's some really fantastic technologies, what Sina is doing at Zentist and some others that really allow you to have your AR balance over 90 at or near zero. And in the data set that we looked at with the 20,000 different locations, we found that roughly 50% of the AR was sitting in current, 12.5% of the AR was sitting in 30 to 60, 12% 60 to 90, and 25% was sitting in the over 90 bucket. So there's something that's inefficient still in the market. And I think that there's a great opportunity for a lot of the innovators to go out there and help get that reduced.
I think you're muted, AJ. Again, it's interesting. The measurement problem is everywhere. And that data is like, oh my God, really 25% over 90? Give me a heart attack right now. Just listening to it, I don't even have a DSO to worry about. I'd go insane if my 90-day was over 25%. One of the things I think about a lot lately, not just in the context of what we do at Patient Prism, but as an industry, what are we doing to drive same-store growth? Because there's been a lot of pressure over the last few years, inflation, interest rates, everything. There's pressure from everywhere. There's demand pressures, there's providers. Has always been a pressure since COVID. And I'm thinking about, is there an RCM lens to same-store growth? And is there something in RCM? And one of the things I think about is, wow, most patients don't utilize their benefits completely. And maybe it's not a question for you guys, but have you guys thought about anything where could the RCM, besides collecting all the money, that's great. That's obviously that contributes to growth. But is there anything that you guys have, like Sina, you or Rob, with the data that you have in your databases, is there any way we can help DSOs improve their top line revenue above and beyond collecting everything that we are deserving?
Amal, I'll take a shot at that, and I'd love to hear what Sina has to say. I think there's two paths that seem to be emerging with regards to helping on the same store sales growth with regards to RCM. One is just, as you mentioned, just that collectability of what occurred. The second is I think we're seeing really interesting movement with the AI vendors that are working with the imaging technologies. And, we know who those are. I know you're involved in that as well, Amal. And those technologies are able to go into the PMS systems and begin to look at some of the treatment that's been identified or presented, but maybe not accepted or scheduled. And I think that is probably one of the biggest open doors for same-store growth that's out there. I see you nodding your head. But this is really fascinating. I don't think it's been talked about yet. And maybe this next round of conferences it's going to come up, particularly at the DICOMA, we'll hear more about it. But I think it's a really fascinating invention. And then if I could, just one more comment regarding the AI. One of the challenges that we have in our industry that I'd like to call on everyone to help us solve is, for the AI to work really well and to solve some of the problems we have in dentistry, we need data and we need integrations. And the integration piece is where we're short. And the PMS systems don't necessarily talk to all the vendors. They're locking out in some cases, and we have to use APIs. APIs are limited. There's a lot of HIPAA concerns and where the data is stored, and the access to that data, I think, is being very well protected. There's been a lot of hacks that we've seen in the industry. But those are two big industry-wide challenges that I think that are in the way of some of the advancements that we could see, where the processing of a claim, the payment of a claim, all the way back up, right? The insurance verification, all the way through the RCM pipeline could really be, or will really be, automated in the future. And I'm going to go ahead and say, I think we're 24 months away from seeing some really cool advancements in the technology.
Mike, any other places is, you think of RCM, the CFO, that function driving same-store sales or supporting same-store sales?
Yeah, I was going to say it. I think that the big thing there is a good relationship with your RCM and your operations, because I know working with a good, strong RCM director, that person can see the offices that aren't maximizing every code. They can see, and it helps if they have obviously an office background, but they can point out those offices that are missing opportunities. They're doing the work. They're just not documenting it. They're not billing it. They're not creating codes for it. And I think that's where RCM becomes a profit center, not just a cost center, is sharing that data and then having an operational team that's willing and open to hearing that data and then addressing the behaviors in the field.
I love that comment a lot. I struggle with it quite a bit, is the siloing of departments. In our world, it's marketing, sales, operations. We look at, and sometimes clinical, right? So if the ops and the clinical team do not partner with the revenue cycle management team, then how do we really affect change? Sometimes it's a human behavior change that needs to happen at the clinical level or at the ops level on both sides. Like you said, Mike, if that, no matter how good your AI is at the back end, if the humans are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, or they're not changing behavior in collecting the information at the front end, like you said earlier, or just communicating with clinicians on what are best practices, then all that siloed information doesn't help anything, right? And how do you affect same-store growth if nobody knows what everybody's doing? Sina, do you have comments on like same-store growth and like how do you talk to your clients about that? Because it's top of mind right now.
Yeah, it's such a broad topic, but I like what Rob pointed out, which is when you look at the ability for computer vision now to read x-rays, not only are you able to standardize across your DSO the diagnosis, and it is a second opinion, let's just be honest, right? We're not replacing the clinician's assessment, but it's something really powerful. I remember when the first time I had an intraoral camera, the ability to actually see as a patient what the doctor is seeing at a very granular level is very powerful. And what I've noticed recently with Yelp and Google reviews for the practices that are using AI for x-ray analysis, the patients are picking up on this, right? And they're saying, hey, this is actually cool because we're all used to Siri, we're all used to using AI in our personal lives. So I think it creates greater trust in the assessment. And then to take it one step further, which is where the same-store sales growth opportunity comes from, the obvious question that patient's going to ask when you diagnose that treatment plan is, will my insurance cover it? If it doesn't cover it, am I able to finance this? So I think if you look at the patient journey and you have this outstanding treatment, right, it's very powerful to then have a plan in place to understand whether or not if we were to submit this treatment to the payer, will it get accepted, rejected, right? How do we bill for it? What are the procedure codes? And that to me is almost like the holy grail, is the predictive ability to understand not only just what the patient needs, but also will the insurance company reimburse it? And if they won't, do we have the ability to proactively provide a financing plan to that patient and have all of that communicated in a very succinct manner, whether that's through the treatment coordinator or the doctor, so that the patient ultimately says yes. And we're basically getting them to a better state of overall health if we're able to do that. So I'm excited for that. I think the more data that we have in our practice management systems and, able to mine that data, the more options we have available to us as providers.
If multi-site, 10 to 50 locations, how are the leading DSOs, the ones that are just crushing it with collection rate, over 90-day AR 0, how are they organizing themselves differently versus their peers? And I'm curious, the opinions of the three of you. So kind of Rob, how are they organizing themselves? Is it centralized, decentralized? What's the 1 to 3 kind of magic elements to the world-class leaders on that function?
AJ, that's a fantastic question, because I think all on the call, you're probably seeing a lot of change. And so when I got into DSOs, I'll call it the 20 year ago OG original 1.0 DSO model, it was all centralized. We're starting at eAssist. We've traditionally focused on solo practices, but we, in the last year, have been getting a lot of calls from mega DSOs. So we're talking DSOs with well over 500 sites. And what I'm hearing from RCM VPs and chief revenue officers at that level is that the access to the skilled resources needed to get the job done is limited. There's heavy competition, I think, in demand for this space, particularly because the market conditions and high debt, you're seeing just a slowdown in some of the transactions with the M&A activity. And so people are really doubling down, trying to really focus on EBITDA. And as they do that, it just puts a lot of focus on the RCM department to collect what's been done and make sure that value chain has been connected all the way up. So today, I say half the calls I get are to go help people collect old AR. The other half is to help take over some of the RCM functions. And we're also starting to see a modularization in the RCM functions that are being outsourced. It used to be that you'd outsource the whole thing. So let's do insurance verification all the way to posting for some of the offices. But now really sophisticated RCM functions are using some SaaS technology for some of those elements. And then they're outsourcing some elements, and they're having some core internal RCM support services that are doing other pieces. And I would say that a call I had most recently was someone who said they kind of view it like their Navy SEAL team, right? Their SEAL Team 6 is focusing on the RCM for the really complex sites that do really either have issues or brand new or the complex procedures, maybe involve medical billing. They're handling that internally, and some of the others they're outsourcing. And I think Sina sees it too. People using his technology for some of those functions as well. So it's an exciting time to see all these elements merging. The combination of SaaS, the combination of centralized RCM function, along with some outsourcing. So we're seeing change.
Sina, your clients are the world-class operator, centralized, decentralized. Like any commonality there?
Yes, it's really interesting. I sort of view this wave of, I think, decentralization as a byproduct of the solo practice market being a seller's market, where as the DSO, you sort of had to say to the clinician, right, who's ready to transition, if you're happy with what you're doing, we're not going to change much. And that worked for a period of time. Then COVID hit, and then we basically had massive sort of pressure on staffing. So meaning, as Rob alluded to, we had difficulty, right, filling the front office with individuals that could actually perform the job. And so I think DSOs started to look at external resources, and we're much more open to outsourcing in the last few years than they've ever been. And I like to have centralization of data first and foremost. So we see this across our DSOs, where I would say, regardless of the DSO, whether the team is decentralized, one thing they've definitely done is they've centralized their data. And the power of centralizing your data is that the entire organization, if you have 18 regions, right, you're all looking at the same sort of baseline KPIs. You're looking at the same SOPs, ideally. And this is where you can start tailoring the offering for one region versus another. Maybe that's a pediatric group versus a orthodontic group, according to what that provider group needs. But the centralization of data is something that I think Rob would agree. Every one of the DSOs that's top performing has invested a ton of capital in making sure that they have the data that they need at their fingertips. And then whether they decide to outsource or use Zentist or a combination thereof, it really comes down to understanding what the baseline is. And within the revenue cycle, what stage of the revenue cycle are they optimal? So maybe if you're Mike at Peak Dental Services, you say to yourself, we're not struggling with collections or aging, right? But maybe there's opportunity there for us to reduce the labor costs associated, with, let's say, eligibility and benefit verification, right? And so what are those benchmarks by revenue cycle stage that you're trying to improve? And then one of the things I see all the time is there's a tendency to add additional steps to the revenue cycle. The best operators are very good at eliminating steps before they add more steps. And this is something that SpaceX and Tesla and all these companies that are world-class are really good at doing operationally, is not looning your sort of process and making it super complicated, but starting to cut out steps in the way so that you're able to scale.
Mike, what's your premise? Centralization, decentralization, outsource, in-house?
Yeah, so I'm a big proponent of centralization, and really going back to kind of my comment earlier, the issue I've run into is it's hard to find those subject matter experts at, in our case, 60 dentist offices. They're great at dentistry, they're not so great at revenue cycle. So I've seen better outcomes with the centralized model versus decentralized. With that said, the communication is key. The RCM team and the offices have to have open lines of communication. I just think of some of the things our RCM offices do. They notify the offices when they have unbilled charges. They notify the charges when they have claims on hold. They notify the offices when additional documentation is needed. I mean, they're really the go-between for that frontline action that has to happen, but they're able to overlook all of the sites, make sure we're on track. As far as outsourcing, I think it is, can you outsource it better, more efficiently than you can insource it? Benefit verification is a great example. The technology around benefit verification, the efficiency, the accuracy is aligned with the cost. It's almost a no-brainer in the settings I've been in. It's just much more efficient than having somebody logging into portals or making phone calls. And so that's something that, we've outsourced. We've moved almost, exclusively. There's other things, like I've recently had some conversations with some back-end AI tools. Right now, for us in our setting, it's cost prohibitive to really add an AI back-end on top of what we have, or in lieu of what we have in some cases. There just wasn't a cost benefit there yet. It'll come for sure, but it just, as and even the vendor that I talked to, indicated, well, the way our model is priced, it really makes more sense for a really mega group. So I think you have to be willing to look at it ongoing, once a year, once every other year, just kind of see what you said. Look at the steps in the process, and are there better ways that we can do each step?
One of the things we love to do on this show is put you all kind of in the hot seat for one idea that a executive founder of a multi-site group can go do in the next 6 months to drive 100K of EBITDA. And something like in the weeds, they can put this on their action plan and really drive the earnings growth that, so many of us are after running multi-site. So maybe I'll start with you, Rob, for your answer to that question.
This will be a fun one. Let me first start by framing the challenge in terms of looking at RCM with 4 different viewpoints or lenses. What is your cost to deliver the RCM function? What is the quality metric that you're going to use? What is the time metric? And then what is the volume metric? And so at eAssist, we look at just RCM costs as a percent of what you collect. At the end of the day, how much money is going to go to EBITDA and what portion of that is related to the RCM function? On the quality side, we look at the collection ratio. On the time side, we look at the speed of payments. A lot of people call those things something, they call that different names, but speed of payments. And the volume side is just what's your AR balance and what are they by bucket. So here's the $100,000 idea. I've been thinking about this since you asked me the question. And so one of the things, probably the most calls that I get at eAssist is to help people go collect their full AR. And so if you're looking at, just the simple, fast, how do we go get it? Just outsource the collection of your hyper-aged AR. Normally, it eAssist, and I think most people would like to pay our vendors, percent of the collection piece. This is one actually you should do fixed fee because you need to adjudicate every claim, especially if you're a larger group and you have audits. You have to be able to get off the books some of those unpaid AR balances. So the 100,000 idea, AJ, is an accounts receivable recovery project. It's time bound. Say it's 3 to 4 months. You identify the number of claims. You reach out to all the practices that have this, and then you go and you collect the money. And then to make the value really double count is you do an analysis on what caused that to occur, the root cause analysis. And I'm just going to give you a little example. We just completed this for a group that had us go after $29 million. And so we went to get those funds. And one of the things that we learned is that 25% of that $29 million in AR were related to insurance verification issues. Imagine that. Like, that is a controllable situation. And back to a comment that Sina made earlier with your treatment financing, if you have an IV issue and the treatment's not covered, that's where you lean on your treatment financing, and then you can get that service done. So that's a big one. And then there's a lot of categories that will pop up in there. A lot of the categories also relate to the clinical operations. So if the provider team doesn't understand exactly what should be attached into a claim to get that claim paid, all of those things come out in the wash when you do your root cause analysis. So the big idea is the AR recovery, and then do an analysis at the end, and then follow what condition occurred to make it that claim was not paid. And that will have a massive effect on your EBITDA and get you a nice short-term cash flow hit. And it's going to be big every time.
Mike?
Yeah, so I've actually got two. One of them I already kind of commented on, is maximizing your billing. Look at the office that's doing it great. Tell the other, in our situation, tell the other 50 offices that aren't doing it great, hey, bill this code. Because if you look at it, $100,000, if you break that down into bite-sized pieces, you're talking literally $10 here, $5 there across 60 offices. You've made it in days. The other one, and I think again, to kind of echo Rob, it does speaks a little bit more to the operations, is know your adjustment codes, know them inside and out, study them, look at what offices are doing them. I guarantee your offices are giving away money they don't have to, and they shouldn't be. But if you don't have good visibility to your adjustment codes, you never know it. You just see a claim paid and you go on down the road. So know those adjustment codes.
That's great. Sina?
For me, it's automating the process around payment reconciliation and posting. So according to the CAQH index, the dental industry in the United States could save about $1 billion a year just saving the time that it takes to manually reconcile the payments that are coming in. So this is post-claim submission, when you had to now go and get the EOB and read the EOB and interpret the denial code and determine what you're going to get paid on, and then go into the bank account and see what money is there. If the check's not been deposited, right, that's a whole other issue. So I think this is something that the technology is mature enough to automate. We're seeing in practices that are using payment posting automation technology, especially AI, they're having to basically not touch 80% of all of their claim payments. It can vary depending on the practice, but it's a beautiful thing that you don't have to hire more people to do payment posting. And this is something that we think is a huge opportunity for practices to utilize AI to reduce OpEx.
Ben, incredible set of insights, gentlemen. I really appreciate your time taken to share with our audience on this topic and the changes that are around the corner and already being made. So thank you very much.
It's my pleasure.